Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on a final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now here's your host, Dave Palmer.
And we are back to the Father. Thanks so much. I see a few people have already commented on the social media sites. Great to have you back with us. And we are in a brand new studio. It's been probably 5 weeks, 6 weeks since we've had a show.
I think it's longer than that, Dave.
Yeah, longer than that. I can't believe anybody's still with us.
I know
you get the email that's sent out, but thanks so much. This is a program that is dedicated to really the timeless and wise teachings of the great doctor of the church, St. Thomas Aquinas, especially as taught in his Summa Theologia, which was written during the second half of the 13th century. He died in about 1275 approximately. So there's a lot there. I've spent the last 10, 11 years of my life studying it, reading it, teaching it, and I love it a lot. And I'm also very grateful to have a couple of young people that help me out here in studio, beginning with Sissel Anderson, who is our producer of the program. She's the North Texas assistant here at KTH on the Guadalupe Radio Network. So Sissel, how are you doing? Welcome back.
I am doing well. Oh my goodness. It feels like you're getting back on a bicycle after a long time. But I kind of worked out because it was summer. We're kind of like an educational class. And so we took a break for summer.
Yeah,
it was an unannounced unofficial break, but it was a break nonetheless.
And you notice we have a new studio, and it's a little bland in the background, so we'll eventually get some decorations and things like that.
And I might graduate to the other room eventually.
Yeah, right. We got to find somebody else to run the board. So anyways, we are crawling back, and we're with you, and I also want to welcome, we're very delighted to have with us now a senior, rising senior homeschool student, William Kirkendall, who has been with us for a year, or how long has it been, William?
A little over a year.
Over a year, yeah. So he brings a lot of youthful vitality and very intelligent young man. So we're delighted to have you with us as well, William. And this show is going to be a doozy. I really didn't even know a couple of days ago what we were going to talk about. And, deadlines are a great motivator. And so I knew this show was coming up, and I kept asking Sissel, are we going to have a show? Are we going to have a show? Finally, yesterday, she said, yeah, we're going to have a show. And a couple of nights ago, I put a video up on my YouTube channel, and it had to do with whether public sinners should be denied the Holy Eucharist, okay? And what does St. Thomas Aquinas have to say about that? And boy, by my standards, and I always have to say that because by other people's standards, it's not a big deal. But by my standards, that video has blown up. It has about 650 views within less than 2 days. And so there's interest in this. And I think it has to do also with the second thing that we're talking about today is sophistry. And who were the sophists? And I say sophists because some people say sophists. But I have watched a lot of people that I respect, like Dr. Peter Kraft and a guy named Professor Alan Holmes from Wheaton College, and they all say sophistry. It's sophists. And so I'm going to say sophists, all right? If you want to say sophist, you can. But this, who were these sophists, and why were they problematic? And also, I am going to conclude the class today saying that I am so glad the sophists existed. I'm so glad that they were there 400 years before Jesus Christ, and for reasons that I'll explain, okay? So lots to talk about, and again, thank you so much for everybody who's out there. I already see a lot of comments coming through. This is going to be interesting, okay? I promise you. So, all right, you guys ready to get started?
Set.
And I have trivia. I don't know about Sissel. Okay, no, Sissel doesn't have trivia. I got some great trivia. I'm going to pitch you two against each other, and everybody that's out there as well. So let's get right to it. And first of all, I want to talk about this issue of Holy Communion. If you can put the first slide up there. Thomas does address the question about should public sinners be given the Holy Eucharist? Okay, now what does this have to do with sophistry? Well, the sophists were moral relativists at the time of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, okay? They didn't have a whole lot of objective truth and standards, and so this is one issue in our culture today that has to do with objective truth. Okay, is it Jesus Christ? Is it the God? And should public sinners be allowed to have it? Sissel.
Hello. So it was brought to my attention that we sound a little bit out of whack on the stream. We're here. Our voices are here, but we're like a wrong sample rate on our stream.
Okay, that's not good.
So it might be a little bit annoying for everyone to. Maybe we can take a poll from our listeners and say what they want to do. Because to fix it, I would have to stop the stream and restart it in just a second after I adjust the sample rate. The sample rate is wrong. If you're familiar with audio, I know our friend Mark Lowe is. But that is what the issue is. I could, according to our engineer, after I just talked to him, he said that the sample rate is not at the one it was supposed to be at. Then that probably is the problem.
So we're going to
He says Mark Lowe is voting for stopping and restarting.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. Can everybody hang with us?
Hang with us for 2 minutes, okay?
All right. 2 minutes. We're going to go ahead and leave and come right back. So don't go
Better
anywhere.
than ever.
We'll be right back. That's right. I can't hear me. Okay. All right. We're back on. Is everybody still with us? Everybody leave? If you left, let us know. Okay. And let us know also, does the audio sound okay now? Okay. So if somebody can report that back to us and if the audio is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on with the program. And again, there's a big issue in our church today about whether sinners who are obstinate in their sin and obstinate in teaching against the official teachings of the Catholic Church, especially politicians seem to get the biggest flack about this, whether they should receive the Holy Communion. Well, St. Thomas Aquinas actually asked this question in the Summa. Okay, are you all aware of what he says, or have you ever read this article in the Summa, William?
I don't think I've read the article in the Summa, but I'm assuming he's going to say public sinners should be denied Holy Communion.
You think so? Okay, all right. Well, well, I'm not going to give it away, but the interesting thing is that a public sinner in the 13th century was different. Well, they're not different, but the examples that he's going to give are very different from today. You know, so there's a lot of good conversation that we can have about this. And by the way, just so you know, first segment we are going to talk about this topic related to St. Thomas Aquinas, the Summa. Second segment we're going to talk about the Sophists. Third segment is when we open it up and we want to get your comments. You can even call us if you'd like to. Phone number here is 877-757-9424. Okay, so especially in the third segment, we would really appreciate your feedback. We may not be able to get to as much of it during the third segment and then the first two segments. And then at the end of the third segment, we play some trivia. And I'm going to pit you and William and Sissel up against each other and see who can come out the champion. So, all right, so most of us received the Holy Eucharist for the first time when we were about 7 years old, right? And most of us go to Mass, at least on Sundays, maybe sometimes during the week. And there's probably never been a case when anybody has said William Kirkendall should not receive the Eucharist. I'm guessing that's the case. I'm guessing nobody is outside St. Philip's and Flower Mound saying Sissel Anderson should be denied the Eucharist, right? But we're all sinners, right? I mean, I've sinned mortally. I'm sure y'all have probably as well. And so why should some people be denied the Eucharist? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because, we hear, you can't receive unworthily, but here's what's funny. And here's where I like to make the distinction is that everyone's unworthy, whether you're a mortal sinner or a venial sinner, like everyone sins. So we're all unworthy. But the distinction here is you can't receive one in mortal sin because you're actually technically not just unworthy, but you're also dead spiritually. So I kind of look at it that way. Like, we're all unworthy, but you can't receive. You can't. have life if you're
Right.
dead.
But you're talking about more a question that we make like I say, I'm not worthy. I'm going to go up to Mass and I'm just going to cross my arms and not receive it. It's a question that I'm a decision I'm making on my own. Right. But what we're talking about is, should priests deny somebody? Okay. Should a priest say, you know what? I saw William doing something really horrible yesterday, and so I'm not going to give it to him. Okay. So in this picture that I have right here, there's a picture of Joe Biden, our current president, and also Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was actually asked by her own Archbishop, Salvatore Cordileone, to not come and present herself for the Holy Eucharist, right? Now, she lives probably most of her life. Well, is she even a politician anymore? I think she may have.
I think she is.
She's
just not Speaker of the House.
Yeah, so she lives most of her life in D.C., and as far as I know, the Cardinal in D.C. does admit her to communion. And so these are two of the examples of what we would call public sinners, and who many people say they should not be receiving the Eucharist. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and this is the Code of Canon Law 915, which says those who have been excommunicated or interdicted after the imposition or declaration of the penalty, and others obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. Okay. So those who are obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. Now, it didn't say anything about publicly doing it, because and there's a lot of questions that I want to raise about this. But here's an interesting, on the next slide, a Pew Research poll that was done a little more than 2 years ago, when Biden was first few months of his presidency in 2021, and Catholics were asked, should Biden be disqualified from Holy Communion? And a full 2/3 of the Catholics said, no, it's okay. I think 67% said yes, he should be allowed. Of course, along party lines, it's a little bit different. Democrats were highly in favor of him receiving it, Republicans less so. But still, most Catholics think, it's not that big of a deal. So what did St. Thomas Aquinas say about this issue? Okay, now the question he asks, as you see up here, is whether the priest ought to deny the body of Christ to the sinner seeking it. And what Thomas is going to say here is he's going to make a distinction between public and private sinners. Okay, if I went out last night and got drunk and committed adultery, that's a private sin. Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't get on the radio. I didn't go out and say I think adultery is okay. It's no problem. Okay, that's a private sin. So Thomas is going to make a distinction here. But it's interesting to see the kind of public sins he brings up. Do y'all want to guess, what kind of examples does Aquinas use in the 13th century of the kind of sins that would prohibit somebody from receiving the Holy Eucharist? And
probably less than what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Because we're probably thinking extreme.
I remember you brought it when we did a show months ago. We talked about was it like the seven sins that he regarded as the worst? I don't remember what show that was, but we talked about like loans and different things like that he thought were sins. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, you actually
some of the guesses that we're getting from Mark are chewing gum in class. That's definitely what it is.
Yeah, definitely, without doubt. Okay, so here's what he says, and this is quite interesting. So here's the next slide. It says a distinction must be made among sinners. Some are secret, others are notorious, either from evidence of the fact as public usurers, okay, so there's the users, or public robbers, or from public robbers. This is like Bonnie and Clyde or something,
Right?
Who are public robbers these days? That doesn't really even exist.
Yeah. They're not the public, having that reputation is not as, I feel like, a big of a deal.
Yeah.
They don't give themselves names and being like, we're these guys and we're going to rob. It's more like they don't want to be known.
Yeah, well, like Babyface Floyd or who's
the Wet Bandits from Home Alone. They wanted to be known.
It's just so funny. The difference between now and then. Okay, or from being denounced as evil men by some ecclesiastical or civil tribunal. Okay, so obviously we don't. With usury, it's not illegal to charge interest on loans, right? But what about like payday loans when there's exorbitant? And a lot of people say that's really wrong. That's immoral to take advantage of the poor by even credit card interest rates these days, I think it's like 27%.
Yeah, it's probably insane.
And so what about people who work for banks? I mean, are these public and obstinate users? I mean, charging way too much interest? I mean, question to be had. Mm-hmm. Okay, therefore, Holy Communion ought not be given to open sinners when they ask for it. Hence, Cyprian writes to someone, I love this quote. He said, "You are so kind as to consider that I ought to be consulted regarding actors and that magician who continues to practice his disgraceful acts among you." Okay, he's talking about a particular magician. How would you like to be that magician who showed up in the Summa? I mean, think about it. I mean, he didn't give his name, but he was talking about a particular one, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, as to whether I thought that Holy Communion ought to be given to such with the other Christians, I think that it is beseeming neither the divine majesty nor Christian discipline for the church's modesty and honor to be defiled by such shameful and infamous contagion. Wow, those are strong words. Now, that's not Aquinas, but he's quoting Cyprian there, and Aquinas made the decision to include that quote in his corpus. So he must agree with it, mm-hmm. right? Because otherwise you wouldn't use it, right? Mm-hmm. So he's talking about robbers and users and actors and magicians. He didn't mention politicians. Okay, so here's a couple of things I'll just bring up for conversation. Let me give the last part, and then we'll have a little discussion about this, okay? Oh, gosh. Okay, next slide says, "But if they be not open sinners, but a cult, the Holy Communion should not be denied them if they ask for it. For since every Christian, from the fact that he is baptized, is admitted to the Lord's table, he may not be robbed of his right except for some open cause." Okay, so that's what Aquinas says. He mentions actors. What if an actor is Catholic and he's in horrible movies in 2023 and he's in sex scenes and glorifying violence, and you never hear anybody say that actor should not be able to receive Holy Communion? I mean, did you ever hear that?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, there's probably a lot of examples of Catholic actors who are involved in on camera doing bad stuff.
I think so, yeah.
People say, "Oh, they're just acting," but they're doing it. I mean, especially like the sex scenes and all that. Mm-hmm. And again, what about the payday loan people? I mean, so are we too hyper focused on politicians? Because it's always the politicians. And I think Aquinas would come down, like you said at the beginning, William. I think he's coming down saying somebody like Biden or Pelosi, and of course there are Republicans that would fit into this category as well, they should not receive Holy Communion. Okay? But he didn't. Obviously, he's writing 750 years ago. He wasn't aware of politics in America in 2023.
Right.
So what do y'all think?
Yeah, I definitely think that sometimes, obviously, we always point to politicians because they're the ones, who are making, decisions and things like that and representing certain things. But I do think it goes beyond that. There are a lot more people we can publicly see. I wonder because obviously he made the distinction between private sinning and public sinning, because it gets interesting though, because you think about it, you have a politician and they stand for something that's really bad, like abortion. They stand for abortion, and you're assuming, I guess the distinction would be that they're continuing to stand for that, even if. I'm just thinking about let's say you see a politician giving a speech one night, and then 5 days later you see them at mass. And obviously to every other person, we don't really know, obviously, unless he's come out publicly and had an apology saying I shouldn't have represented that, gone to confession. You just have to assume that they're still standing for that. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about the heart, and that ultimately we can't know someone's heart and when that conversion could happen. But we're assuming that if in between that time, they haven't done anything. They're continuing to publicly.
Yeah, right. It's kind of a stretch to say that they had. But you're right. Did something happen between that moment?
But I'm thinking if a priest sees someone do something, commit some sort of sin outside of the confessional, or outside of mass, and then they see that person come to mass, it's they can't deny that person necessarily.
Right. Because they don't know what's.
They don't know if they've gone to confession before
then. Everything that Thomas talks about, the actors, the magicians, the users, the robbers, these are people that are committing the act. The politicians are not committing the act. They are publicly supporting it. And so
Right.
I would wonder if like somebody back then would have said, you know what, I think robbing is okay. Robbing banks is okay. I'm not robbing a bank, but I think it's all right. That's one layer kind of removed, because you're not the guy out there robbing the banks. Joe Biden, I don't know what his history, but he's not out there performing abortions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But so anyways, I'm not saying that Biden should receive the Eucharist. I'm just saying that maybe we hyper focus on one type of public sinner, and maybe there are more, that should maybe be scrutinized a little bit more. I don't know. That's
I'd
all I'm
agree.
saying.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments out there, Sissel?
Mark's asking, how are you supposed to know if they are a hidden sinner, gossip, or peeking during the confessional? Is what he's saying.
If they're
I think it's more not so much that like a hidden sinner is like someone that you should be able to identify. We're all technically hidden sinners. We all sin, and sometimes often in private and in places where not everyone can see.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest word that we could use to describe all this is scandal. If somebody is creating a situation where other people are not going to be as aware of sin, like when a politician who is a Catholic and who is receiving the Eucharist, in public life is supporting things that are egregiously evil, that gives a lot of other people a pass to say, well, then maybe I could go have that abortion, because, Biden is, he's a Catholic, he's receiving the Eucharist, he supports abortion. So I think it's scandalous. Whereas if, one of us goes out and gets drunk, a few people might see it.
Yeah, it might
but
be
it's
a
not,
small
it's not
baby
public.
scandal.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
not
it's a
big.
personal.
Yeah, but if I got on the radio the next day and said, you know what, I got drunk
And it was
last night,
great, you all should
great,
do it,
and
yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with it, well, then
Right.
that becomes public scandal.
Right.
So
When you advocate for it, yeah.
yeah, exactly. All right, so that's going to do it for the Aquinas section of the program. And when we come back, I'm going to introduce you to the Sophists. And I'm going to ask Sissel and William and everybody else out there if you can name some pre-Socratic philosophers. Okay, I know Sissel's probably got about 5 or 10 floating through her mind right now.
Absolutely.
And you're not allowed to zip ahead on the PowerPoint presentation either, okay? All right, can you name Mark Lowe, anybody out there, can you name some pre-Socratic philosophers, okay? And can you name any Sophists, and who are they? Why are they problematic? And also, I'm going to argue why they're advantageous in a certain way as well. Okay, we'll be right back with Back to the Father. All right, we are back, and this is Back to the Father. It's a production of Guadalupe Radio Network. We are on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter accounts, or X accounts, I guess Twitter is called now.
Oh my goodness, that gave me such a heart attack that day because I hardly use Twitter, but all of a sudden I'm going through my apps and I see this black app, and I went, when on earth did I download this, and what is it?
I know. I think it's so ugly and creepy looking, and I don't like it, but I do use Twitter a lot, and I don't even know if it's called Twitter anymore. It's just like, I got on X the other day. I mean, that just doesn't really roll off the tongue.
It sounds like a dating app or something like
X.
Yeah.
'Cause X means like denied,
Right.
All right. So, who are the Sophists, and why should we care? Is the question that we're going to ask right now.
Yep.
And I'll just kind of throw it out to you guys and anybody who's out there watching in social media land. Have you ever heard of the Sophists?
Yes.
And also,
Can we name
Can you name any? We'll just kind of throw it out because the next slide I'm going to show you a group of what we call the pre-Socratic philosophers, some philosophers who lived before or right around the time of Socrates. So can you name any?
Dave, you say that if you think, therefore, you're a philosopher.
Yeah.
So anyone before Socrates was a philosopher. So I could
There
go
you
back
go.
to like Old Testament. Anyone in the Old Testament. Also, Annabelle did comment Pythagoras.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh,
yeah.
good. No, he's one of the Sophists. So
Yes.
Annabelle's
Oh, so
actually heard of
she
Pythagoras.
has.
Okay, we're going to talk about him today. Annabelle, I am so impressed. Okay, so I'm going to put up on the screen here. There's a couple of names that you're going to be familiar with. Okay, so the next slide here has about 10 or 11 of the pre-Socratics. And just kind of look through this list. And the one who probably pops out to most people would be Pythagoras, because every one of us, when we took geometry class, we learned about the Pythagorean theorem, right? Where the square of the two small sides of a right angle
No, don't take me back to this. I left this world behind.
equal to the square of the hypotenuse, right?
Yes.
So Pythagoras, that's the same Pythagoras. That's the guy.
We have him to blame.
All right, so Thales of Miletus is typically considered the first Western philosopher ever. I say Western because, there are Eastern philosophers, and there's people like Confucius and the Buddha and Lao Tzu and that came, I think, even before these. But it's interesting. Have you ever heard the axial period? Peter Crave talks about this axial period of the world, and it was around 600 BC. And in different parts of the world, these sages began to emerge. So you would imagine independent of each other, like in China and India and in the Old Testament. And so these very bright men popped up and came up with these really interesting philosophical and religious theories at the same time. But there was no indication that they would have had any idea of each other. So they call it an axial period. So Thales of Miletus is considered the first of the Western philosophers ever. Okay, his philosophy, and get this, okay? And the very first philosopher, have you ever heard of this guy? Do you know what he said?
Nope.
Okay. He said that everything is water.
Oh, yes, I have heard this. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Whoa.
Okay.
Tell that to the people who are stranded without water.
And the reason is that water conforms itself. Like if water gushed into this room, it would conform itself to the room. Water also can be in different phases, like it can be in a frozen state, it can be in a gaseous state. Okay, and water is very plentiful. So he came to the conclusion that everything is water, including this desk, you and me. But he's actually kind of right, because we are about 80% water, right?
Right.
And so, but he said there's only one element. Okay, and it's water. All right, so that was the first philosopher.
Yeah.
The second one was Anaximander, and he came along, and I think he said, no, not everything is water. Everything is air. Okay, and then Anaximenes and Pythagoras came along, and he was all about numbers. All right, he thought the whole world could be explained numerically. Okay, that's why we get and so he's trying to figure out everything. And then Heraclitus, he was the one that everything was in flux, and he's the one that said you can never step into the same river twice. Have you heard that?
I think so, yeah.
Because it's always different. You can't step into a river and then 10 minutes later, well, it's not the same water. It's not everything's changed, right?
Right.
Xenophon. Okay, so anyways, you go down the list. What we need to know about the pre-Socratics, and I think something that we should have more of today, that they had a great curiosity of the world. Okay, so they're looking at the world, and even if you're wrong, and even if you say it's all water, at least you're trying to figure it out.
Right.
Okay, so these were cosmological questions that they had. We're curious about the world. We're trying to figure it out. Is it the four elements of fire and earth and water and air and I think that's largely been lost today. Not many people look at the world and really with a sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder. Like, I want to try to figure. We think we got it all worked out, right? Because of the scientific revolution. All right, but perhaps more importantly, in how it relates to the Sophists, is that they also thought that the world is ordered. And therefore, there must be a corresponding moral order as well. Because if the world is ordered, the sun is coming up every day in the east and setting in the west, and there's a water cycle, and everything seems to kind of make sense. They said, well, there must be a moral order as well. There must be a certain way that we're supposed to act.
Right.
All right?
That makes sense.
So that was kind of the contribution of the pre-Socratics. Does that make sense, Cecil?
I think so. I think so.
And then what happened was, and I'm gonna put the next slide up. The Sophists came along, and you can see they were generally a couple of hundred years later, sometime in the 4th and 5th century BC, and they basically said nonsense. Okay, there's no reason to try to make sense of the world. There's no reason to try to think that there is some truth, and certainly no moral truth, and it's all nonsense, and we can't even come to know things really. No knowledge of objective truth. They were like classic skepticists, right? And interestingly, they focused on rhetoric rather than dialectic. Okay, rhetoric is the art of persuasion. Okay, so if I can just convince you of something, even if I don't have the truth on my side, because they didn't think there was a truth, right?
Right.
But if I can convince you of something through eloquent speech, and then you come to my side, then I've succeeded. It doesn't matter. Right. There's no truth. It's just that this is what I think is true, and if I can convince you of it,
it's subjective.
Then it's all subjective. But this is what the Sophists did. All right. Also, they believed in positive law over natural law. Natural law is discovered. Okay, so there's a certain thing like, I don't think we should, like for no reason kill animals, like just for fun. We shouldn't certainly kill children. We shouldn't, be disrespectful towards our parents. This is kind of natural law. This is something that all people can kind of figure out just through the laws of nature, right? It's kind of imprinted in us, right? The Sophists did not buy that. They thought every single person was on its own, and we make up our own law. Okay, positive law over natural law. Law is not discovered, law is made. All right, and the two most famous Sophists are who Annabelle mentioned, Protagoras and also Gorgias. All right, these are the two guys who lived around the time of Socrates. Okay, and again, a lot of Plato's dialogues were Socrates debating Sophists. Okay, and unlike Plato and Aristotle, who started schools, the Academy and the Lyceum, there was no Sophist school. No, they didn't go to school and learn this, but they were more just kind of like itinerant, philosophers that ran around and spread their philosophies. So, anyways, I'll stop there. Are there any comments or anybody saying anything yet, Cecil, that I should respond to?
I think we're caught up at the moment.
Okay.
Yep. Mark Lowe was talking about how that in The Wizard of Oz, when Scarecrow, when he gets his brain, the first thing he says is the Pythagorean theorem. Is like he says it out loud.
Oh, is that right?
Suddenly he's smart again, so he starts listing it off. So
is that right?
There's a little bit of trivia for y'all.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because it's a fact. I mean, the Pythagorean theorem is something that had to be discovered. And it's factual. So, all right. Well, Mark, that's a pretty interesting little tidbit of information there. So, all right. So now we're going to talk specifically about these two Sophists and what they believed in. The first of them is Protagoras. He had a very famous quote, and he said, "Man is the measure of all things." Okay. Now we wouldn't say man is the measure of all things. We would say God is the measure of all things, objective truth, the divine reason, the divine law is the measure of all things. But Protagoras, being a moral relativist, thought that William comes up with his own truth, Sissel with her own truth, and me with my own truth, okay? And so each of us is the measure of our own things, okay? So we kind of do anything we want. He said, in every question, there are two equal opinions, okay? So if you and I disagree on something, it's okay because we both have our own opinion, right?
Right.
And we only know what we experience individually through our senses. The law is created rather than discovered, as I mentioned a moment ago. And he said, quote, as for the gods, I have no way of knowing that they do or do not exist. Okay, so he basically was just like, he checked out. Intellectually, he checked out. And he's just like, whatever. I have no idea if this is true or not.
So we only experience through our senses. So he's an empiricist, basically?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So he would be an influence on people like David Hume and George Berkeley and
John Locke.
John Locke. And yeah, so he's an empiricist for sure. And so, okay, so then Gorgias comes along, and he's the most famous of all the Sophists. And he kind of railed against this whole concept of logos because the pre-Socratic philosophers believed in logos. Okay, the logos was like the highest ideal of truth, beauty, goodness, meaning. And in John chapter 1, he begins his gospel by saying, in the beginning was the logos. Remember, John wrote in Greek. So the word wasn't word. In the beginning was the word, and that's how we translate it. But what John said was the beginning was the logos. Okay, so he was writing for a Greek audience. He's saying, okay, this truth, this transcendent truth that you aspire for, it's Jesus Christ. Okay, and he was God. He was with God in the beginning. Okay, so good little tie-in there with Christianity. But Gorgias says, not only is there no logos, there's no being, there's no stable order, there's no intelligibility, there's no form, no structure, no meaning. Okay, there's like nothing. There's nothing to aspire to. There's no truth that we can try to discover. And then he says, even if there were being, we would have no knowledge of it. And even if there was knowledge of it, we couldn't communicate it. So he is like totally checked out intellectually, like I mentioned, and just saying, we can't do it. There's no truth out there. And so there's no reason to discover anything. But also,
let me just take a break and sit back and.
But exactly.
Like, what am I supposed to do with?
Peter Kraft has an interesting quote. He says, ethics always follow epistemology. So if you don't think that there's any truth that you can come to know, well, then you will live accordingly, and then anything goes, right? Because if there's no truth, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die, right?
So epistemology kind of is intertwined with ethics.
Yeah,
Those two philosophical. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so this kind of thought process led to nominalism. We study William Bavacca, right? Nominalism, where there's no truth. It's just names that we put on things. Modern day skepticism, Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy, Derrida's. Were you here for that class?
I think so.
Yeah, deconstructionism. So anyways, when nothing really matters, when nothing is true, there isn't a truth.
It's not objective.
They would deny nature. They would deny essences. They would deny. So it's like, man, there's nothing. It's kind of depressing, because there's nothing to discover. So that's why these guys were problematic, right? So as I mentioned, I think that there was some advantages to the Sophists, and I'll put the next slide up. Okay, so what's good about the Sophists? What
their name reminds me of esophagus, so I mean they have a fun name. That's what's good.
That's not one that hit my radar, but
okay.
That's fine. Okay.
You know what? I like to keep us open to all possibilities.
Okay, well let me start with this example that I'll use. Did y'all see the movie What is a Woman by Matt Walsh?
I've heard it, but I've never seen it.
I've seen clips of it, not the full thing.
Okay, so anybody out there who's seen it, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was entertaining and interesting and all that. Matt Walsh was responding to sophistry. Okay, he's responding to eloquent people that are out there saying there's no such thing as one. Okay, it's total nonsense, but these people have influenced the culture so much that a large portion of the people have bought it, and now don't believe that there's anything objectively true about being a man or a woman, right? And so Matt Walsh would never have made that movie if it wasn't for modern day sophistry, right? So my point, and I'll go on to the next slide here, is the Sophists gave us Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle because that was the fuel for Socrates. And like I said, most of the Platonic dialogues was Socrates debating these Sophists. And if there's nobody spouting nonsense, there's no reason to respond. So some of the greatest philosophical thoughts that have ever, come down in the world were because truth was challenged.
Right.
And if truth hadn't been challenged, nobody would have taken the time to define what it means to pursue truth, okay?
Right.
Dr. Peter Crave says the Sophists were part of what he calls the Great Conversation, all right? So it's like today, not that we want to welcome, error and faulty thinking and all that, but it allows us to sharpen our intellectual swords, right? So that we can... I got into a debate last night at Walmart with a guy who said he didn't think the Catholics were scriptural,
Oh, my. Has he attended a mass recently?
Right. And then the third one says they are part of the challenge and response. And I want to just read this one excerpt from Peter Crave. I am increasingly becoming a huge fan of Peter Crave. Okay. He says, the great 20th century historian Arnold Toynbee saw all of history as a challenge and response. Since philosophy is a crucial part of history, the history of philosophy, too, is challenge and response. And the challenge, even if it is destructive and dangerous, is as necessary to progress as the response. The religiosity of a village needs the village atheist to keep it on its toes. And then he goes on and says, the issue the Sophists raised is utterly contemporary. In fact, it is probably the single most important issue for modern Western civilization. For this civilization, envied and imitated by the rest of the world, now differs most radically from all others that have ever existed by the fact that most of our intellectuals, mind molders, and educators, both formal at the universities and informal in the media, for the first time in human history, fundamentally agree with the Sophists. Now think about that. Did that sink in? He's saying, Peter Crate is saying, we live in a world of sophistry.
Yeah.
We live in a world where there is no recognition and respect for objective truth, where everything is relative. And this is the sea that we're swimming in. This is the sea that your parents are raising you in, and I'm raising kids, and Sissel might raise kids in one day as well, and you do, William. Okay, so remember Soren Kierkegaard said, 100 years ago or so, and he was a Christian existentialist philosopher, he said, what the world needs is another Socrates. Okay, so my point is we might just be creating a culture right now where our next Socrates and Plato's and Aristotle's are going to emerge. And we're going to have this great renewal of thought. And it might be William Kirkendall, it might be somebody we know.
I'm going to say Kirkendall is a great last name for a philosopher. We've already discussed this.
Kierkegaard and Kirkendall.
It's so much better than Anderson or Palmer. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
You just need to grow one of those beards, and you'll be just right, William.
Let me...
I have a few comments to catch up with in a minute once you're done.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things real quickly. Is that, first of all, in the Declaration of Independence, we hear these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, that's objective truth. Okay, that's not relativism. That is saying we hold these truths to be, true, absolutely true, and not up for debate. Okay. Now, listen to this quote from Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader who was hung by his people eventually. He said, everything I have said and done in these past years is relativism. If relativism signifies contempt for fixed categories and for men who claim to be the bearers of an objective, immortal truth, then there is nothing more relativistic than fascist attitudes and activities. From the fact that all ideologies are of equal value and all ideologies are mere fictions, the modern relativist infers that everybody has a right to create for himself his own ideology and to attempt to enforce it with all the energy of which he is capable. That's Benito Mussolini.
Oh.
Okay, so he is admitting to being a sophist. He didn't use the word, but he admitted to being a moral relativist, okay? This is a guy that wreaked a lot of havoc on a lot of people during World War II, okay, and ended up getting killed by his own people. All right, comments?
Yes. So I have Annabelle on YouTube. By the way, we got to meet Annabelle at the summer speaker series. So that was really cool to be able to put a face to a name. And she says, when you're talking about that, it's good that the sophists existed because then it had us be able to create these philosophers who were able to combat that. And she's like some of the teachings of the church that when they were challenged, we were able to define them better. Which is kind of cool. And then Mark commented that sophistry is now normalcy. And then maybe something good will come out of all this gender lunacy, kind of like you're saying, Dave, that we'll probably have really strong philosophers and people in the beliefs of, gender identity in the future. And then also Forrest commented the Bible verse, Romans 8:28, and that is, and we know that in all things God works for those who love, for the good for those who love him, have been called according to his purpose. So it's a good reminder in this time. Also, Mark wanted to say that you are definitely much smarter than the scarecrow.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. So anyways, do yourself a favor and go back and, study some of the pre-Socratics. Peter Grafe says that the pre-Socratics set the stage for the history of philosophy. And every single philosopher who followed them, including Aquinas, including Plato, Aristotle, and Hegel, and Kant, and Marx, and, you name it, Kierkegaard, Kierkegaard, that they're all influenced one way or another, whether they know it or not, by the pre-Socratics. Okay, so why is Socrates the name that most people are familiar with? It's
a better name.
It is a cool name, but why are the other names not rolling off your tongue, like Anaximander and Pericles? People have heard of Pythagoras, but
it's a great question.
Because, I have my opinion on this. Of course,
I thought you had a solid
opinion
answer.
is just as equal as your opinion, right? Says the sophist. Well, I think it's because it was the truth. And ultimately, the truth will prevail
and stand the test of time.
Yeah, exactly. And so right now, all the sophists of our culture, they're going to just be relegated to the trash pit of history, and nobody's going to remember who they were. But somebody's going to come along, and they're going to clear things up, and they're going to make it even clearer than they were before, like was pointed out. And we'll end up better than we were before. So it's a different perspective. And the people that are spouting all this nonsense today are just giving us a chance to sharpen our arguments, and go back and read philosophy and, of course, and more importantly, theology. All right. Anything else? Or do we want to move on to y'all have any comments?
I do actually. Yeah, about objective truth. It's interesting because I find that if everything was subjective, it was all about the individual, then what's stopping me from saying I was born into the wrong body? What's saying I'm not a woman? But there's objective truth to tell me that no, I'm not. If it was all about the subject, I could just rationalize every sin under the sun. It doesn't really make sense that everything that's subjective is the truth, because we could all have our own opinions on things, but that's not what's really real.
Yeah, exactly.
I find it interesting.
Yeah, good point. And, we talked about Jean-Paul Sartre, and he was a classic existentialist. Existence comes before essence, and you're born, and then you create yourself.
Right.
You create yourself into whatever you want to be. There's no, teleology. There's nothing that we're supposed to, nothing. There's no human nature that is kind of guided towards a certain end.
Right.
It's all just a crapshoot,
right.
And we
unlike Aristotle, who said that although he didn't believe in the Christian God, he believed that there was something there was something up there that formed everything, and there was an almighty being in the skies.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, if you out there have any other comments or questions, thank you for those that have already been turned in. And I think we're going to be doing this, God willing, on a relatively regular basis. We have to sit every now and then when we have share-a-thons, but I have, been doing a lot of deep dives into a lot of philosophy lately. So I'm going to continue to sharpen my game and hopefully every week bring you something that's interesting according to what I have found interesting in my study of Aquinas and also these other philosophers as well. So anyways, thanks everybody for being with us. Let's move on to trivia. Are you all ready for that?
100%.
Do we
Yes.
have our little sound effect, or did we drop? We dropped that, didn't we?
Yes, we did drop that.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. We were much too mature for that.
Do.
All right.
I could do a little of my own sound effect.
Yeah, I think you just did, didn't you?
Dun, dun,
All
dun.
right. I have approximately, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, that means we can't have a tie between two
Okay.
of you, right? 11 questions based on the country of Greece.
Oh boy.
Okay. Did you not see this one coming? I mean,
dear.
come on.
I guess
I
we
should've.
should
I
have.
should've.
but-
Okay, so I am going to be also, I can't watch all the social media sites, but it appears most of the people are on YouTube, right?
Yes.
So if Mark and Forrest and Annabelle, if you guys are still there and you want to jump in, and if you get the answer before, it's kind of unlikely you're going to be able to, not because you're any less intelligent, but because you got to type it and I got to see it.
but you can keep your own running.
Yeah,
we'll do the honor system that you had, right?
yeah, that's right. Let's just say that this is primarily going to be between William and Cecil. Okay, y'all ready?
I'm ready.
You sharpened up on your Greek.
I better.
All right, here we go. First question: what color makes up the country of Greece's flag?
Oh, blue and white.
All right. All right.
Thank
Cecil.
goodness my brother who quizzes me on flags all the time, it actually paid off.
Okay.
you
All
go.
right. Very good. What is the capital of Greece?
Athens.
Ooh,
Oh,
William
shoot,
got it.
got
All
that
right.
one.
All right. We got a horse race here. Whoever gets closer, this one,
dear.
what is the population
Oh,
of Greece?
gosh.
The population.
Oh.
Whoever gets it close.
I always am so bad with knowing population of any country or state. I just would like to say that right now.
Well, I have high
I'm so bad.
expectations for you on this
Yeah,
one.
please, because
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna say-
Mark has put his guess in.
I was going to say 6 million.
So you're saying
I'll say
6,
7 million.
6, 7, and Mark said 16. The answer is 10. So Cecil got it right.
Oh my
So
goodness.
you realize Dallas-Fort Worth is almost as big as the country of Greece.
That's crazy.
Right? We got about
Yeah.
8 million people
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So, all right, Mark, thanks for, okay. Again, whoever gets it closest, in what year was the first known Olympics held in Olympia, a site in southern Greece?
What
In
year?
what year, whoever gets it
Oh, crumpets and
closest,
tartar sauce. Let's see.
in what year was the first known Olympics held in Olympia?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be so bad.
Okay, right now, if you're keeping score at home, Cecil has 2, and okay, Mark has put in his guess.
He's saying 400 BC.
Okay, 400
Interesting.
BC.
I'll say 700 BC.
I'll say 300 BC.
Wow, one of you is within about 75 years of it. 776 BC.
Oh, good job,
That goes way back.
Yeah.
And you know the other interesting thing, because I think like Homer and Hesiod and some of these writers, it's interesting because like, did you know Plato did not like Homer?
No,
So
I didn't.
Plato, and for interesting reasons, because he thought he gave the gods had horrible qualities. The gods were as bad as the humans, and Plato was an idealist that we should live by virtue, and he thought it was horrible that Homer would describe the gods as being as bad of people as we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so William got that one. It's now 2-2. Okay, here's the fifth question. Feta cheese is one of the most recognized Greek cheeses.
Okay.
What animal
Goat.
milk is the cheese traditionally made from?
Goat. Are you gonna guess something else, William?
Cow? I don't know.
And okay, Mark. Okay, Mark said goat. It's a sheep.
It's
Oh.
a sheep, really?
A sheep
okay.
is not the same as a goat.
I've
Yeah.
always thought it was a goat. I've always been
Okay.
told it was a goat. I swear.
Well, yeah, like goat milk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have thought, well, it says sheep. Let's just assume they're right. Okay, in Greek mythology, whose golden arrows made people fall in love?
What's her name?
Not
What's her
Apollo.
name?
Come on, Mark.
What's her name?
Mark.
What's her
where are
name?
ya?
Shoot, why can't I remember? Aphrodite. No, not Aphrodite. Why did I say Aphrodite? That's not right.
Let's see.
What's her
Mark
name?
said Cupid. That's,
Wait.
who's it? Golden arrows made people fall in love.
No. Oh my gosh, I can picture like a picture from my book, a mythology book.
It's not Cupid.
Oh.
Cupid was like a little angel or something.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
yeah.
A
Was
little-
it? Does it give me an H?
No.
Okay. Then I don't
It's
know.
Eros.
Oh, Eros. Yes. Oh my
okay,
gosh.
okay.
Obviously.
And,
Hello.
and you also had a corresponding Roman god.
Yeah.
And there, there's
I
always
get them confused all the time.
I know. There's a Roman
but
god.
Eros, that makes sense because
Okay,
it's a
now
word for
Mark
love.
Mark said, Mark got it. Mark got
Yeah,
it.
and so did Annabelle.
Okay.
Annabelle got it.
Okay, so Mark.
Also, I would just like to say that everyone said goat for
Okay.
for the other one. So I would just like to say.
Okay, so okay, what is the king of all the gods?
Zeus.
In Greek myth- Okay,
Oh,
William.
come on.
All right.
That's just annoying.
William has taken the lead.
That is really annoying.
Sissel,
I would like
when
to
she's
retire.
losing, it's annoying.
It's very annoying.
Yeah. Okay, now, why would that be annoying that Sissel is losing?
It is annoying. Okay.
There's let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 more questions. Okay.
Okay.
What type of toy, still played with today, was invented by the ancient Greeks?
A ball.
That's a good guess, but
Okay.
that's not right.
A sling. A slingshot. I don't know. I'm just throwing random things out, guys.
Okay.
No idea.
No.
It's
What would be invented?
think of something
Really simple.
Okay, Mark's at the top. That's a great guess as well.
Oh, that's a top. That's something I was thinking like that. I was thinking like jacks.
It's the yo-yo.
The yo-yo.
okay.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we remain William 3, Sissel 2. I get a lot of joy.
I would still like to say that I think since everyone unanimously agreed that feta cheese was from a goat.
So, okay, the third to last here. How did ancient Greeks win the favor of the gods? What did they
By
do?
sacrifices?
Yes, sacrificing what? Animals.
Animals.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
was
all
just
right.
going to say.
So is it now less annoying now?
Okay. Feta cheese is made with up to 30% goat's milk mixed in, or it can be 100% sheep's milk. So it's both. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay, all right. It's,
Not salty.
You're still wrong.
Just wanted to throw it out.
Boy, she doesn't like to be wrong, does she? She does not like to be
Not
wrong.
when I'm not 100% wrong.
Okay, so Sissel has 3, William has 3, Mark has 1, and Sissel is whining.
I would just like to say that we don't actually plan it to be this tight at the end, but always ends up like this.
Yeah.
I know. It always does, doesn't it? You guys are a great
Almost
match.
always, yeah.
What was strange about the early Olympic games, such as chariot racing and wrestling?
They were naked.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
I was only about
right.
50% sure that was the answer.
Yeah, that is. That
That would
is
have been a
true.
little uncomfy.
Okay, so now this last one is a true and false.
We have a 50-50 chance, William.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this
true.
was up by 1. Okay, Mark got that new one right as well. Okay, true or false? Women participated in the Greek Olympics. True or false?
False.
False.
Okay, you both say false.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
is that your final answer?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, I think so.
I also.
Okay, you were both correct.
Yes.
And they could not even watch.
Yeah, they weren't even allowed to be there.
Because
Which,
you
to
got a
be
bunch of
fair,
naked
if they
men.
were naked, yeah, I also would not want to be there. So I'm not mad at that.
Okay, Mark said true. So Mark goes down in fiery flames of defeat.
Wow.
All right.
He's never gonna watch again now.
And once again, we have more people watching the trivia section of the show than we ever dreamed
As
of
always.
having. So we should just do trivia the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Mark was guessing. Okay, before and he just wanted to get it right. So Mark, you had a coin toss, 50% chance, and by golly, you should have said false. All right. So, all right. Well, that just about does it. Did y'all enjoy listening and hearing about the Sophists?
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting because I feel like we hardly ever focus on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody ever talks about them. So next week, you know what? Stoics and Epicureans, or we'll see. You guys know who the Stoics are?
Yes, roughly.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll see.
I know at least 1% of most of.
Yeah.
of them.
That's it.
Yeah.
But you're good at trivia. Okay, and you're good when you're fall behind too. You take it very very.
I am very modest about it.
Very
I don't. I'm very classy. I don't get upset.
Yeah.
I don't try to look up and clarify.
Well, thanks everybody for being with us. Tell your friends and family about Back to the Father, because we will not take as long of a break between the next show. I promise you. Okay, so we'll see you next Friday, 1:00. And if you want to join our email list, email backtothefather@grnonline.com. Thanks, Cecil. Thanks, William.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.